If every decision you made this week came from your own mind, then why do so many of them feel off? Why do some choices drain your energy instead of fueling you? Carl Jung believed that we don't live inside isolated minds. We live inside psychic ecosystems. And those ecosystems are shaped not just by our family or culture, but by the people we surround ourselves with every single day. Friends influence us not only with what they say, but with what they reflect, what they normalize, what they ignore, and what they reward. Think about it. Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a friend and felt smaller somehow, less motivated, more confused, a little more doubtful of your path? That's not always random. Jung warned that our inner lives are shaped by external atmospheres, and the people around us are part of that architecture. Most of the time, it's not obvious. Sabotage doesn't arrive wearing a villain's mask. It shows up as support that's too soft or too sweet, as praise that locks you into old patterns, as silence when you needed truth, or as a shoulder to lean on that always seems to drain more than it holds. In this video, we're going to walk through 5 specific types of friends that quietly sabotage your potential, not through hatred or hostility, but through unconscious roles they play in your life. And here's the key. They usually don't even know they're doing it. That's why it's so hard to detect. But once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. And once you name them, you can change the entire way you show up for yourself. By the end of this, you'll be equipped with the psychological insights and tools to reclaim what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who the world reflects back at you. We'll draw from decades of studies, case files, Jungian analysis, emotional intelligence research, trauma science, and even hidden works that most people haven't heard of. Each part will shine a light on one type of friend: the shadow enabler, the persona mirror, the energy leech, the silent competitor, and the fate distractor. This isn't about blaming others. It's about waking up to the subtle, often invisible psychological contracts you've signed. You didn't come here to stay stuck in cycles of sabotage. You came here to grow, to transform, and to walk your own path, not one borrowed from someone else's shadow. So, let's begin the process of seeing clearly, because once you do, everything changes, from the friends you choose to the future you build. The shadow enabler. There's a type of friend who always tells you, you're perfect just the way you are. And while that sounds loving, maybe even healing, there's something dangerously deceptive about it. Carl Jung warned that true wholeness isn't about staying comfortable. It's about confronting the parts of ourselves we've buried. When someone constantly validates our worst habits in the name of support, they're not loving us. They're enabling our shadows. This is the friend who cheers you on when you skip responsibilities, who tells you that every failed relationship was the other person's fault, who says you don't need to change anything, just be authentic, even if that authenticity is masking unresolved wounds. They don't mean harm, but they confuse acceptance with permission. Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because that includes the dark side, the parts we deny, the habits we excuse. Debbie Ford, in her overlooked book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, explains how we form emotional identities around our dysfunctions, impulsiveness, procrastination, emotional chaos, because they've been rewarded or normalized by those closest to us. A 2023 longitudinal study by King's College found that peer reinforcement of negative behaviors, like self-sabotage or emotional volatility, can increase their recurrence by up to 37%. Why? Because we feel seen. We mistake comfort for connection, even when it's keeping us stuck. From a neuroscience angle, this is what's known as amygdala hijack. When we're emotionally dysregulated, the brain's fear center takes over, shutting down logic and amplifying impulsive decisions. If our friend responds to our meltdowns not with calm accountability but with mutual emotional flooding, we get trapped in a feedback loop, feeling bonded yet going nowhere. It becomes a cycle that feels like belonging but functions like a cage. The shadow enabler means well, but they prevent you from facing yourself fully. They cheer for your comfort zone, not your evolution. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse that comfort for love. But real growth often feels uncomfortable. Real friends challenge you to rise, not retreat. They help you see your patterns, not protect them. Jung's concept of individuation, becoming your true self, requires that you confront your own shadow, not cuddle it. And that includes setting boundaries with those who unconsciously feed it. So ask yourself, who in your life celebrates you staying the same, and who challenges you to grow, even if it's messy, even if it's hard? That's the difference between an enabler and an ally. And knowing the difference could change everything. The persona mirror. You ever catch yourself laughing at a joke that isn't funny, or nodding along just to keep the peace, even though something inside you disagrees? If you've done that around a certain friend often enough, you might not be bonding with them. You might just be wearing a mask, and they might be in love with the mask, not with you. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social face we wear to meet the world. But what happens when a friend only connects with your persona, not your authentic self? Irving Goffman, one of the early pioneers of social psychology, described life itself as a performance. In his classic work, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, he explains that we play roles depending on the stage we're on: work, family, friendships. But sometimes these roles become rigid, especially when a friend praises you only for the role you perform. Maybe they adore your optimism, your humor, your confidence, but never seem to notice when you're struggling, doubting, or just tired of pretending. This creates a psychological trap. A 2019 fMRI study from the University of Amsterdam showed that people who habitually suppress their authentic feelings around others experience elevated distress signals in the anterior insula, the part of the brain that processes emotional conflict and internal pain. In simple terms, your body knows when you're faking it, even if your mind hasn't caught on. R.D. Laing, in his underappreciated work Self and Others, warned that when we're stuck in performance mode long enough, we begin to lose touch with our own desires. We forget who we are without the costume. That's how imposter syndrome starts, not just in the workplace, but in relationships too. You feel seen, but only for the role you play. You feel liked, but not known. The persona mirror friend isn't necessarily manipulative. Often, they're responding to what you've shown them. But over time, they reinforce a version of you that may no longer feel true. And the cost of that is subtle self-betrayal. You stop sharing your truth. You second-guess your instincts. You hesitate to evolve because change might break the illusion they like best. Jung believed that the journey to wholeness means breaking the mask, not to destroy it, but to make sure it's you behind it, not just a version built for applause. So if you feel like you're constantly on around someone, ask yourself this: are they connecting with your truth or just the performance? Because the real you is far too valuable to hide behind a persona forever. The energy leech. Some friendships don't start toxic. They become draining over time. Have you ever felt exhausted after a long conversation, like your body just ran a marathon without moving an inch? That's not random. That's your nervous system sounding an alarm. Carl Jung taught that energy isn't just physical, it's psychic. And certain people, without intending to, can feed off yours. These aren't just emotionally heavy friends. They're energy leeches. And the damage they cause is real. The energy leech isn't always loud or dramatic. They often appear vulnerable, kind, even endearing. They vent a lot. They share every thought, every crisis, every emotional wobble, as if it's your job to fix it. At first, you feel important, needed, but soon, their problems become your baseline. Your nervous system is stuck in alert mode, and what they call talking becomes your slow unraveling. Antonio Damasio, a leading neuroscientist, discovered that feelings aren't just thoughts, they're body states. Your system records every emotional wave as physical information. When someone constantly unloads their stress onto you, your vagus nerve, the body's main regulator of emotional safety, starts to shut down. This is what scientists call vagal withdrawal. The result? Anxiety, fatigue, even immune dysfunction. A massive NIH data review in 2022 confirmed this. People who were overly empathic, those always holding space for others without replenishing their own, were significantly more likely to suffer from energy depletion, brain fog, and sleep disturbances. Emotional overexposure literally rewires your physiological resilience. That's not just kindness, it's a cost. Mira Kirschenbaum, in her underrated book The Emotional Energy Factor, provides a powerful insight. Not every friend deserves unlimited access to your emotional bandwidth. She offers a tool called the energy budget, a framework for evaluating which interactions feed you and which ones drain you. Think of it like calories, but for your nervous system. If every conversation leaves you tired, resentful, or overwhelmed, you're overdrafting your energy account. The truth is, empathy without boundaries becomes self-harm. You are not a therapist. You are not a sponge. And being a good friend doesn't mean sacrificing your peace. Jung's concept of psychic integrity means honoring your own limits. So ask yourself, are you truly helping them, or just enabling their emotional dumping ground? The difference between compassion and codependency is this: one uplifts, the other depletes. Not everyone who leans on you is toxic, but if they never learn to stand on their own, eventually you will fall, and no one wins in that collapse. It's okay to love someone and limit them. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's survival. The silent competitor. Sometimes the most dangerous rivalry is the one that never speaks its name. This is the friend who claps when you succeed, just a beat too late, who says all the right words, but something in their tone twists every compliment into a subtle critique. Carl Jung understood this dynamic well. He believed that what people can't integrate in themselves, they project onto others. And in this case, your growth becomes their threat. The silent competitor doesn't openly sabotage. They operate through micro-invalidations, small, almost invisible ways of shrinking your achievements. You tell them about a new job, and they reply with, "Must be nice." You share your joy, and they shift the topic. Or worse, they subtly reframe your success to highlight how it somehow disadvantages them. It's not a knife, it's a needle. Constant small jabs that drain your motivation and make you question if you're allowed to shine. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory helps explain this. His work revealed that we constantly evaluate ourselves in relation to others, especially those in our immediate social circle. The 2021 behavioral economics study at Stanford found that when close friends feel quietly envious, their subtle competitiveness reduces the other person's creative problem-solving ability by up to 24%. Why? Because internalized tension shuts down lateral thinking. You don't just feel judged, you start shrinking yourself to avoid judgment. Richard Smith's lesser-known anthology Envy Theory and Research breaks this down even further. Envy is most corrosive when it's passive, when it's not declared but felt, and the closer the relationship, the more it hurts. Because you expect support, but get shadowed instead. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, this behavior isn't new. In tightly knit tribes, status was linked to survival. If someone rose too quickly, others might unconsciously perceive it as a threat to their belonging. The same wiring plays out today, just in more sophisticated forms. The silent competitor may not want to harm you, but they need you to stay just a little below them. It keeps the friendship emotionally safe for them. So how do you spot it? Tune into how you feel after sharing a win. Do you feel celebrated or vaguely ashamed? Do they match your enthusiasm, or do they always one-up it with their own news? And most importantly, do you ever hesitate to share your growth around them? Jung believed that real friends are not reflections of your ego. They are mirrors of your soul. They don't compete with your light. They protect it. And if someone's presence makes you doubt the right to be proud of yourself, that's not friendship. That's quiet warfare. You're not required to keep rivals close just because they wear the costume of support. You're allowed to rise, and you don't need to apologize for it. The fate distractor. Have you ever noticed how one particular friend seems to pull you off course without even trying? They're always suggesting something spontaneous, urging you to relax, to forget your plans, just for today. One plan becomes two, then a whole pattern. Before you realize it, weeks have slipped by. Your goals are still sitting where you left them, untouched. Carl Jung warned us that the unconscious has many voices, and not all of them speak from inside our own minds. Sometimes it's our friendships whispering us away from our path. This friend, the fate distractor, isn't malicious. In fact, they're often the most fun to be around. They bring adventure, laughter, lightness, but their lifestyle comes at a cost. It's rarely aligned with purpose. They live for the moment, not the mission. And if you're not grounded in your own sense of direction, their rhythm can slowly replace yours. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who coined the concept of flow, once said, "Control of consciousness determines the quality of life. The moment we lose control of where our attention goes, we lose connection to what we value." And attention is exactly what the fate distractor absorbs. A 2024 Apple Health dataset revealed that adults now lose an average of 2.3 hours per day to unplanned social interactions, texts, calls, drop-ins. That's nearly 16 hours a week, almost a part-time job. And most of it, according to behavioral economists, doesn't enhance happiness. It dilutes intention. Neil Fiore's little-known book, The Now Habit, tackles this exact pattern. He explains how procrastination is often disguised as social bonding. We don't intend to sabotage ourselves. We just keep choosing comfort over momentum. And certain friends, especially those with little structure in their own lives, make it dangerously easy to justify that drift. You think you're being flexible, but you're quietly abandoning your future. This isn't about cutting off joy or isolating yourself. It's about boundaries. Purpose needs space, focus needs protection, and friends who truly support you will understand that. They won't take it personally when you choose work over wandering or vision over validation. Jung believed that individuation, the journey to become who you're meant to be, is sacred. But it requires solitude, effort, and sacrifice. If someone's presence constantly pulls you away from that inner calling, then no matter how fun they are, they're not neutral, they're a detour. So ask yourself honestly, who in your life supports your goals only when it's convenient for them? And who respects your silence, your structure, your striving? Because in the end, your destiny isn't written by inspiration, it's written by repetition, and the people you repeat your days with matter more than you think. Unconscious contracts and projection. Some friendships don't just happen, they bind, and not in obvious ways. These are the relationships that feel magnetic, familiar, hard to walk away from, even when they hurt. You may call it loyalty. You may call it history. But Carl Jung would call it something else, a psychic contract. These are unconscious agreements formed between two people's wounds, not their wisdom. And if left unexamined, they quietly lock you into roles that limit who you're allowed to become. You see it when one friend always plays the helper and the other the mess. Or when one is the star and the other the sidekick. The roles never reverse. The expectations go unspoken, but the guilt of breaking them, it's heavy. That's the weight of an unconscious contract. Melanie Klein, one of Jung's contemporaries, introduced a concept called projective identification. It's when we not only project our emotions onto others, we unconsciously provoke them into becoming what we need them to be. If you've ever had a friend who only seemed to love you when you were broken or struggling, you might have been trapped in their projection. You played the role that matched their unhealed story. Peter and Ellen Bader, in their lesser-known but powerful book Unspoken Agreements, explore how these psychological contracts form in early life, then reenact themselves in friendships. They suggest writing what they call a shadow contract breaker letter, not to send, but to name the deal you never agreed to. Something like, "I release myself from being the emotional caretaker in our friendship. I am allowed to grow beyond your expectations." This kind of self-examination matters, because when you start changing, setting boundaries, evolving, saying no, the friend with the contract often resists. Not because they hate you, but because your growth violates the old terms. They feel abandoned, betrayed, not because you hurt them, but because you're no longer feeding the dynamic their identity depended on. Group dynamic studies have shown that even small disruptions in roles, like the quiet friend becoming assertive, can destabilize a relationship. That's how powerful these invisible rules are. They govern what can and cannot be said, who gets to lead, who must shrink, and if you don't question them, you'll mistake compliance for connection. Jung taught that healing doesn't just come from understanding yourself. It comes from reclaiming the parts of you that others made you suppress. So if a friendship only works when you're smaller, softer, or less self-honest, ask yourself, what contract did we sign without words? And is it time to tear it up? Growth isn't betrayal, and changing the rules isn't disloyalty. Sometimes it's the only way to become who you were truly meant to be. Psychic energy and decision fatigue. Not all sabotage is emotional. Some of it is mental, silent, cumulative, and invisible until you're completely burned out. Ever felt like you had 100 tabs open in your brain after spending time with certain people? That's not just introversion or stress. That's psychic energy being drained through what psychologists call decision fatigue. Carl Jung believed that psychic energy was as real and limited as physical energy, and once depleted, your ability to grow, decide, and become who you are gets hijacked. When friends pull you into constant choices, dramas, or moral dilemmas, your mental bandwidth erodes. Even deciding how to respond to a vague text or whether to bring something up again becomes another micro-decision stacked on top of dozens more. Over time, you stop making strong choices, not just with them, but in your life. You start defaulting to autopilot, then wonder why your motivation's gone. Roy Baumeister's well-known ego depletion model supports this. It shows that our self-control and decision-making power are finite. Each trivial or emotionally charged choice slowly chips away at it. And a 2020 Columbia EEG study took it further, revealing that when people are exposed to high volumes of social choices or emotional decisions in a short time, their P300 brainwave, the very marker of conscious decision-making, flatlines. In simple terms, the brain gets tired of thinking. It shuts down to protect itself. Christine Carter's lesser-known book, The Sweet Spot, offers a surprising tool to counter this. The energy budget audit. You list every relationship in your life and track, not how you feel in the moment, but how you feel afterwards. Energized, numb, scattered, calm. You'll often find that the most draining people aren't always the loudest. They're the ones who keep your brain in constant motion, second-guessing, decoding, managing, compensating. Jungian theory reminds us that the unconscious doesn't care about good intentions. It reacts to patterns. If you regularly feel off after certain interactions, your psyche is registering an imbalance, even if your words haven't caught up. And if that imbalance becomes chronic, you start forgetting who you are outside of the roles you play to maintain the friendship. You weren't meant to be everyone's emotional processor. You weren't built to carry 15 unsaid conversations in your head. That's not connection. It's confusion. And confusion, when repeated, breeds paralysis. Protecting your psychic energy is not optional if you want to grow. It's essential, because every time you say yes to constant mental noise, you're saying no to clarity, vision, and personal evolution. The most powerful transformation often starts with the quietest decision, choosing who gets access to your mind. Neurological boundaries and trauma echoes. Have you ever said yes when every fiber of your being wanted to say no? Not because you were polite, but because something in you froze. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system responding to an old threat. Carl Jung believed that unhealed trauma doesn't just live in the past. It echoes into your choices, especially in relationships. And when those echoes meet blurry boundaries, your friendships stop being safe. They become survival scripts. Some friends cross lines so subtly that you don't even recognize it as a violation. They overstep, interrupt, guilt trip, or push emotional intimacy faster than you're ready for. And instead of asserting yourself, you shrink. Not because you want to, but because your body remembers something you've long forgotten. Trauma doesn't always come from violence. It can come from emotional enmeshment, from being raised to please, from never learning it was okay to say no. Stephen Porges, founder of the polyvagal theory, wrote, "Safety is the treatment." When your nervous system doesn't feel safe, you don't just feel anxious. You lose access to your full self, voice, clarity, strength. They all go offline. That's why certain friendships feel more exhausting than others. You're not just managing the person, you're managing your fight-or-flight response around them. Veterans Affairs research has shown that when trauma survivors learn to set firm boundaries, flashbacks, dissociation, and emotional volatility drop significantly. That's not just psychological, it's neurological. Boundary setting literally rewires your vagus nerve, the pathway responsible for regulating calm, focus, and emotional balance. Janina Fisher's lesser-known but groundbreaking book, Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors, breaks this down with an exercise called somatic boundary rehearsal. You don't just think about saying no, you physically practice it, saying, "That doesn't work for me," saying, "Please don't speak to me that way." At first, it feels terrifying, But each time you speak up, your body registers a new truth. I'm allowed to take up space. Jung emphasized that the path to individuation requires reclaiming the parts of yourself that got frozen in fear. For many, that means learning to set boundaries not with enemies, but with friends. Because some friends unknowingly replicate the very dynamics that hurt you growing up, and unless you name it, you'll relive it. So here's the real question. Who in your life activates your freeze response? Who makes you doubt your right to say no, to pause, to protect your peace? And what would it feel like to finally choose safety over sacrifice? You don't owe anyone access to your nervous system, especially if that access keeps you trapped in silence. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors. They don't push people away. They show you who's safe to let in. Individuation and the supportive circle. What would your life look like if every person around you truly wanted to see you become your most powerful, fulfilled self? Not just the version of you they're comfortable with, but the one that scares you a little because it's so full of potential. Carl Jung called that journey individuation, becoming the person you were always meant to be, underneath conditioning, fear, and social performance. And here's the truth: you cannot do that alone. The people around you matter. They shape your inner dialogue, your beliefs about what's possible, and how safe it feels to change. A supportive circle doesn't just celebrate your highs. They challenge you when you're hiding. They remind you of your values when your vision goes foggy. They don't just reflect who you are. They reflect who you're becoming. Viktor Frankl, the renowned psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, once wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." But here's the catch. Your why needs a witness. Purpose grows stronger when mirrored by others who respect it. A 2024 study by the Penn Resilience Project found that adults who engaged regularly with purpose-aligned peer groups had a 31% increase in grit, measured by their ability to stay consistent with long-term goals. That's not magic, it's psychological reinforcement. Jay Early's under-recognized book Self-Therapy offers a powerful framework for this. Through internal family systems, he introduces the concept of parts, inner subpersonalities that all need different kinds of support. When you surround yourself with people who only speak to your protector parts, the ones who play it safe, stay agreeable, avoid risk, you stagnate. But when someone speaks to your visionary part, the bold one, the part that dares, that's when real momentum builds. Individuation isn't about isolation, it's about discernment. Choosing to align your circle not by comfort, but by congruence. Ask yourself, does this person help me grow into who I'm becoming, or do they keep pulling me back into who I was? Because the people closest to you aren't just company, they're co-authors of your destiny. There's no shame in reassessing your relationships. Jung believed that transformation requires separation from illusions, old roles, and yes, sometimes from people. But what comes next isn't loneliness. It's clarity, and from that clarity, you'll start attracting friendships that match your evolution, not your stagnation. You don't need 100 people to believe in you. Just a few who see your becoming, who protect your flame, and who refuse to let you play small. That's the circle that changes everything. Reassessment, toolkit, and cognitive repatterning. What if the friendships draining your potential aren't toxic in the traditional sense, but programmed into your mind as normal? Carl Jung taught that we don't just live through habits, we live through psychological schemas, unconscious patterns that guide how we think, feel, and relate. And the friendships we attract are often reflections of those hidden scripts. That means if you don't audit your relationship patterns, you might keep repeating the same friendship mistakes, just with different faces. Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive therapy, once said, "The way you think affects the way you feel." And nowhere is that truer than in friendships. If you carry a core belief like, "I must always be the fixer," or "I'm not interesting unless I'm entertaining," you'll unconsciously gravitate toward friends who reinforce those roles. It feels familiar, but familiar isn't always healthy. Familiar can be a cage. A 2022 study by the University of Queensland mapped how friend-related automatic thoughts, like guilt, fear of abandonment, or over-responsibility, correlate with negative mood swings. The stronger the unconscious belief, the harder it was for participants to set boundaries or walk away from draining dynamics. This isn't just emotional, it's cognitive conditioning. So how do you break the cycle? Jeffrey Young and Janet Klosko's underrated book, Reinventing Your Life, offers a practical solution: schema repatterning. It begins with awareness. They recommend a friendship schema audit, a simple but powerful quarterly review where you write down each major relationship in your life and ask 3 questions. What role do I play in this dynamic? Does this role align with who I want to become? Do I feel more empowered or more diminished after each interaction? You'll be surprised how many nice friendships feel heavy once you stop filtering through obligation. That's not betrayal, that's awareness. And here's where cognitive repatterning kicks in. For every limiting thought, like "I can't be honest or they'll leave," you rewrite a counter-belief grounded in evidence. Something like, "Real friends can handle my truth, and if they can't, that's not my burden." Over time, this retrains your mind to recognize and expect supportive dynamics. You begin filtering not by guilt, but by growth. And the shift is radical. Jung believed that the unconscious rules our lives until we make it conscious. This audit is how you reclaim the pen. It's how you stop running outdated friendship software coded in childhood and start living with intention. You're not here to carry relationships that cost you clarity, peace, or purpose. So look around. Who do you keep near out of comfort? And who would you choose again, knowing everything you now know about yourself? Healing is not just about letting go. It's about choosing better, thought by thought, friend by friend. Life becomes lighter when your mind does. Choose your circle, choose your fate. At the heart of every meaningful transformation lies one quiet, powerful truth. Who you surround yourself with will either expand your future or quietly erase it. Carl Jung warned us that the unconscious is not just shaped by childhood or dreams, it's sculpted daily by the people closest to us. The friends you laugh with, confide in, lean on, those people shape your identity in ways you rarely notice, until the damage is done, or the growth becomes undeniable. Now that you've seen the 5 hidden friend types, the shadow enabler, the persona mirror, the energy leech, the silent competitor, and the fate distractor, it's time to see how they've been showing up in your life. These roles don't always come from malice. In fact, most of the time, they come from pain, unhealed wounds colliding in the shape of a friendship. But if you want to stop repeating the same emotional cycles, the first step is seeing them clearly. Individuation, Jung's name for the lifelong journey of becoming yourself, requires courage, not just to grow, but to protect that growth. And that means reevaluating your circle. Who pushes you toward your highest potential? Who makes you feel more like you after every conversation? And who, if you're honest, holds you back with invisible chains of guilt, comfort, or obligation? Every friend you keep is like a mirror. Some reflect your truth, others reflect your shadow. But the most dangerous ones are the mirrors that distort you just enough to keep you small, without you realizing it. You now have a toolkit. You've learned about psychic energy leaks, unconscious contracts, decision fatigue, and boundary trauma. You've seen how evolutionary psychology, behavioral economics, and trauma science all confirm what Jung intuited decades ago. The wrong company can fragment your psyche, while the right ones can rebuild it. So here's the challenge. Take a quiet moment. Think of the people you interact with most often. Which ones light you up? Which ones dim your clarity? And most importantly, who are you still giving access to? Not because they deserve it, but because the old version of you needed them. It's okay to change the rules. It's okay to upgrade your standards. It's okay to say, this version of me no longer matches this dynamic. Because choosing your circle isn't just a social decision, it's a fate decision. And remember Jung's most haunting reminder: who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. So look within, not for blame, but for clarity. Protect your path. Reclaim your power, and never again forget this truth. Your potential was never meant to be shared with those who fear it.